I wasn't planning on using my head to go hit him.
Struck your shoulder.
Nah, I didn't feel any of that. That was pretty bad tackling for him, though.
I thought I was done with the storyline. I mean, I really did. There wasn't really much more to say. We all thought that Tua should at least consider retirement. He said no. And then he pretty much expressed that he wasn't going to change a single thing about the way he wants to play football. And he kind of proved that to us on Monday Night Football. So before we get to the content, we are on the grind to 1 million subscribers. Make sure you subscribe and turn on our notifications to help us reach that goal. And now that we get all that out of the way, break! So Stephon Diggs is out for the season, and the Houston Texans were without Nico Collins on Sunday Night Football when they faced off against the Detroit Lions, which meant that Tank Dell was going to see more targets. The problem? I had no idea who the Texans wide receiver 2 was going to be, which made it very difficult to project receiving yards at the very beginning of the game. Now, as Sunday Night Football started, we saw John Mechie explode for over 65 receiving yards in the beginning, so at halftime, I decided to take advantage of this. I went on PrizePicks to check his live projection and saw that he only needed 6 more receiving yards in the second half for his square to hit. And based off of the flow of the game, you didn't need to be a genius to know this was going to work. So I also saw that David Montgomery only needed 15 more rush yards in the second half for his square to hit. So I decided to test the waters with my first live pick and made an easy $60. Now, if you want to take advantage of this brand new feature, make sure you download PrizePicks and use my promo code Mikerophone to get a free $50 when you make a play of $5 or more. And if you followed me on Instagram, you would have seen this projection on my story, but since it's a live projection, I highly recommend turning on my story notification so you get them immediately. And thank you, PrizePicks, for the sponsor. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? In all of my videos on Tua, I've always expressed empathy for this young man's situation. I can't imagine how difficult it must be to be practicing and training your entire life to play the game of football, only to be put in a situation where your life is literally in jeopardy if you do play the sport of football. And I think that's what's so unfortunate about Tua's career, because the very year that the Miami Dolphins fired Brian Flores, which was a shock to many of us, and decided to hire Mike McDaniel, who seemed to have believed in Tua more than any coach he's ever had, on top of trading for Tyreek Hill and building the ideal offense around Tua, things started to take a turn for the worst for him. And the worst part is, it seems like he has no regard for his own life. I mean, in week 3 of the 2022 season, Matt Milano would hit Tua and he would stumble and fall as he tried to get back into the huddle. This was a clear indication of a concussion, but Tua attempted to hide it.
Kind of got my legs caught under someone, and then they were trying to push back, and then kind of felt like I hyperextended my back or something. And then on the next play, I kind of hit my back and kind of hurt, and then I got up, and then that's kind of like why I stumbled. My back kind of locked up on me. But for the most part, I'm good past whatever concussion protocol they had, so.
And the worst part is Tua would play 4 days later, despite clearly suffering a concussion, and the results changed the course of NFL history. As Tua would get sacked really badly versus the Bengals, he would give a fencing response, and the result of this was the NFL completely overhauling the concussion protocol for the foreseeable future. Now, you have to understand, a fencing response is when someone suffers a traumatic brain injury from strong impact to the brain, and the impact is so traumatic that it causes the arms to flex into an unnatural position. When you understand what a fencing response is, when you look at Tua suffering it, it becomes all the more gut-wrenching to see. Now, as a result, Tua would take a few weeks off. He would return for week 7 of that very same season, which in my opinion was crazy considering the fact that he suffered 2 major injuries to the head in a week span, and then he would suffer a 3rd concussion in week 16 of the 2022 season against the Green Bay Packers. Now, following this, it was very clear to the Miami Dolphins that they needed to get a solid backup QB, so they went out and got Mike White. But on top of that, Tua decided to take some judo classes to learn how to fall gracefully and to learn how to take hits. Now, that summer was also very similar to how fans have felt about Tua over this past season. There's questions about whether or not Tua should retire, to which his parents gave a very interesting response to.
Oh, he comes back. Yeah, he comes back. You know what I'm saying? And
that's their guy. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, they love him. We love them and what they're doing, and how they're, helping him with his recovery and everything else, trying to get him back.
So now that an offseason's gone by where there was an emphasis on making sure there was a contingency plan if Tua had trouble staying healthy, in addition to making sure Tua could stay healthy, the Dolphins went into the 2023 season. And honestly, he had one of his greatest seasons to date. Tua was able to play in each and every game. He completed 69% of his passes, threw for over 4,600 passing yards, 29 touchdowns, 14 interceptions, finished top 5 in comeback player of the year voting, became a Pro Bowler, got to play in his very first playoff game of his career. I mean, it was truly a remarkable season. And then on top of that, the Miami Dolphins signed him to a huge contract extension, a 4-year, $212.4 million extension with $167 million guaranteed. But unfortunately, things would go from bad to worse. And it seemed like Tua just completely forgot everything that he learned. In week 2 of the 2024 season, once again, Tua would have no regard for his neurological health, leaning headfirst into a tackle made by Damar Hamlin, which resulted in yet another fencing response. So at this point of his career, in the past 2 years, Tua has suffered 4 concussions, 2 of which were so traumatic that it caused his body to flex in position. And of course, once again, fans were wondering, should Tua retire? And this was a very polarizing topic. On one hand, you had Mike McDaniel saying this:
it would be so wrong of me to even sniff that subject. You're talking about his career, right? His career is his. Bringing up his future is not in the best interest of him.
But eventually, we knew what the decision was going to be. Tua would return shortly after and say this:
I appreciate your concern. I really do. I love this game, and I love it to the death of me. That's it.
Tyreek Hill would go from posting highlights of him in a Kansas City Chiefs uniform to saying this:
we're back, baby. Strike up the f***ing band. We're back, baby. Start me this week, baby. Let's go.
And we would find out that Tua already made a decision on his future.
My understanding is that Tua Tagovailoa has no plans to retire.
Now, look, I'm not saying that Tua should retire because, again, I've always preached empathy in this situation. My only hope is that Tua would at least be a little bit more cautious about his neurological health, because after all, he still is entitled to $167 million, even if he was to retire. But instead, he's choosing to play because this is something he's worked his entire life for. But it seems like he's not taking any steps at all for his own neurological health, because very shortly after, he would make a decision on whether or not he's wearing a Guardian cap.
Would you wear a Guardian cap?
Nope.
Why?
Personal choice.
Now, Tua would make his return against the Arizona Cardinals in the end of October, and he would face off against the Buffalo Bills in a loss in the beginning of November. And the very comical part about this is there were moments where Tua would slide and the crowd would just go absolutely crazy for him. And this takes us all the way to Monday Night Football. Honestly, at this point, I'm terrified of watching Tua on national television, but Monday Night Football was a significant game for the Miami Dolphins, primarily because this is a team that got off to a horrible start without Tua under center, and they were going into a make or break game against the LA Rams. Both of these teams were in similar situations. Both of these teams have the potential to make it into the wild card round of the playoffs, but unfortunately were battered by injuries all season long. The Rams in the form of not having Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp the whole year up until recently, and the Dolphins in the form of not having their starting QB, which they didn't really have a contingency plan for because they released Mike White before the season even started. And there was a point in this game that really indicated that Tua really just learned nothing from this whole situation. And honestly, I'm not his parents. It just really sucks to watch as a fan of football. So in this game, Tua only threw 1 interception, and this interception potentially could have ended his career because he would throw this interception to Christian Roseboom. Roseboom would run all the way back and he would get tackled by none other but Tua. But look at the way Tua decides to try to tackle Roseboom, and this is what drives me insane. Roseboom is literally on the sideline. I mean, you don't need to do this. If there's anyone in the NFL that fans wouldn't blame for making a business decision and allow this to become a touchdown, it would be Tua. But to be honest, that wouldn't even be necessary here. All you had to do was shove him out of bounds. But for some reason, Tua consistently leads with his head and risks another concussion. Now, in this case, you might be thinking,
Mike, you're just overreacting. You didn't need to make a
whole video on this.
But if you take a look, Roseboom does get tackled by Tua, and Tua gets hit on the side of the head. Could you imagine if this was the front of the head or the back of the head and it would have knocked Tua out? We'd be having a completely separate conversation here. And they're just instances that I just don't understand this man's thinking. Why not wear a guardian cap, for instance? Why would you lead with your head as you're trying to tackle? Why would you even try to tackle at all at this point? And the craziest part is Tua just laughs this whole situation off.
I wasn't planning on using my head to go hit him. So.
Yeah, I wasn't planning on using my head to go hit him. Whoops! It's not like I've had 4 concussions in the last 2 years. It's not like I've suffered traumatic brain injury that's so gruesome that I literally flexed my hands in place. He at least admitted this.
Nah, I didn't feel any of that. That was pretty bad tackling for him, though. That was pretty terrible.
Look, at the end of the day, it's not like I'm Tua's dad or anything. It's just I've never seen someone that has so little regard for their human life when they just don't need to. I mean, we saw Aaron Donald retire this past offseason primarily because he wanted to preserve his brain health and he felt like he had nothing left to give the game. There's no question in my mind that Aaron Donald had at least another 5 years left in the tank, but there was really nothing to play for. He's won a Super Bowl. He's one of the most decorated defensive players of all time. It's pretty much what Calvin Johnson was for the Detroit Lions, only as a defensive tackle and with a much happier ending, and obviously with the Super Bowl. But I guess the main difference between Aaron Donald and Tua's career is Aaron Donald was at the top for a very, very long time, and Tua was just placed in a good situation for his career just about 2 years ago in the 2022 season. And in that case, I do empathize with him because it's very hard to retire from the game you love at the age of 26 and go coach high school football or go create a venture capital firm or move on to something else when you just got placed in the best position of your career to succeed. At the same time, at the very minimum, can you please do something to take care of your brain? I mean, a guardian cap, something. I don't understand this stubbornness. It's very unnecessary. But let me know in the comment section down below. Maybe I'm just over exaggerating this. But if you think this is bad, you should see what's going on with the Dallas Cowboys. Micah Parsons is calling out his head coach. Jerry Jones has a design flaw in his stadium that's pissing off his players, but he doesn't care. Dak Prescott's out for the rest of the year, and I guess this year isn't the Cowboys' year. I made a whole video on it, and it's very in-depth. I'll meet you guys there. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.